What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy. We are live. I'm Katie Gause, joined by Michael Agello. And Michael, we have lots to talk about here tonight. Let's get right into it. Toronto, they've done it. They have clinched the series against Ottawa. They are moving on to the second round. The core four showed up. Stolarz made plenty of big saves that he needed to. Let's dive right in. Talk to me first off just about what this means for this team to be able to do this, to move on to the second round, because everyone was starting to get nervous. They were starting to doubt. The jerseys were burning, but it's okay. We are going to live another day. What'd you see from the Leafs?
Well, I think this was a sigh of relief for the Maple Leafs because, and I've said on previous shows, had they gone to Game 7, I would have favored the Senators because all the pressure was would have been on Toronto if they had gone back to Scotiabank Arena on Saturday night. And I thought that they faced the greater level of pressure, being up 3-0, losing a game in overtime. That was forgivable. The performance on Tuesday night in Toronto was unforgivable. It was a pathetic effort by a team, and especially that core group who were minus 16 in that game. Yeah. So they, not all of them, but most of them really showed up and really played an effective game. And the Leafs got performances out of secondary players, which in past years, it's all been on the core four. Mm-hmm. And tonight they got some performances from, as I said, second, third, fourth liners that helped them win this game and this series.
Yeah, and Craig Berube said it after that last game when people were asking about the core four. He talked about how this is a team. It's going to take a team effort. It's going to take teamwork and taking everyone to do it. That being said, at the same time, it is the playoffs, and you need your stars to be your stars. You need them to show up. They did that tonight. What was different? What did you notice? Willie Nylander, for example, on his birthday, having a big game. And guys, I got to mention this before we go any further. There was a game sheet mishap before puck drop. So Alex Nylander was added to the official lineup by mistake. Willie Nylander listed as a scratch. If an official hadn't noticed this, then he wouldn't have been eligible to play. And we would be talking about a whole different story. That would have been the worst birthday of all time. But luckily, it didn't happen. He had a huge game. What did we see from Willie and the rest of the stars on the Leafs tonight?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because in 2002, and I was not a reporter at that point, but I remember this vividly. The Leafs submitted a lineup for a playoff game, and they did not have, I think it was Robert Reichel listed. And they were forced to play with 19 players because of that mistake. But they ended up winning the game.
Okay.
Now, I said on the show on Tuesday that I thought that the player that needed to show up the most was Nylander, because Nylander has had a propensity to be a playoff performer. He did it last year. He's done it in years past. And he was very terrible, especially on that Dylan Cousins shorthanded goal in the third period, where it seemed like he was dogging it or he was exhausted or whatever. He didn't catch up to Cousins, and Cousins scored the goal. Tonight, he showed a lot of effort. There was one play where Tyler Clevin took him out, and Nylander went at Clevin, who's a bigger, tougher, younger defender. Yeah. It wasn't like he knocked him down, but the effort and the I think, the effort was definitely there on the part of Nylander. And I think there was a higher level of compete from Austin Matthews. He seemed to, especially in the faceoff circle, I don't know what the final numbers were, but in the third period, he'd won 13 of 17 draws.
Yeah.
They needed those performances out of their big players to push them over the top.
Well, and you mentioned this earlier, but talking about the support, other players, a guy like Max Pacioretty is a good example of that. Didn't even play in games 1 and 2, comes in, and Craig Berube was masterful tonight at, reading the game and manipulating his lines accordingly. But Max Pacioretty moves him up to the second line, gets an assist on the Nylander goal, goes down to the third line with Domi and McMahon, scores that go-ahead goal, ends up being this game winner to clinch the series. What can you talk about with Berube and knowing his team, I guess, and just seeing the way he is able to, manipulate things? And this is going to be something that's very crucial because coaching matchups play an even bigger role in the playoffs. What did you see from Berube from the bench tonight?
Well, even before tonight, even
Yeah.
after the game 5 loss,
Hmm.
he basically said, "Well, it's not a core four; it's the team.
Yeah.
And we have to focus on the team. It's not all on these guys," which was a good message. Then this morning, he basically says, "Well, we're going with the same lineup. I like what I've seen out of these guys. We're going with this group." The only change that he made was that he moved Pacioretty up to the second line with Tavares and Nylander. And anybody who's watched the Leafs all season, as I have, Pacioretty played his best in a span of maybe 2 weeks, playing on the left side with Tavares and Nylander. Remember, this is a guy who scored 30, 35 goals.
Yeah.
He's had injury issues over the last few years. They gave him a chance as a walk-on, as a tryout contract. He won a job.
Great story. Yeah.
Yeah, he's had issues staying healthy, but the type of player that he is, it made no sense for them to put Nick Robertson back in the lineup. And I think Nick Robertson's a very talented kid.
Yeah.
But after he took that penalty early in the series, I don't think Berube said, I can trust him. I have to put a veteran in there. And Pacioretty performed, and tonight has a goal and an assist in the biggest game of the season.
All right. Well, we'll keep talking about Toronto in a minute. I do want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the Ottawa Senators, right? I mean, they certainly made this interesting. It was a 3-0 series at one point. They found something when they won that first game. They really showed, I think, a lot. And there were times where this series, I mean, we had overtimes, right? This could have been a different series altogether. Ottawa definitely showed something. So what does the future look like for Ottawa? Because, of course, this stings. We saw Brady Tkachuk after the game, very emotional. We know how much he cares. I think he showed a lot to everyone that questioned him maybe as a captain, because there were a lot of discussions over the regular season kind of criticizing him a bit. He showed something. Ottawa showed something. What did you learn about them that is going to, lend to their future in this league?
Well, first of all, I think Travis Green did a fantastic job with this team. Steve Staios did an excellent job in terms of adding players. The problem over the last couple of years wasn't scoring for the Ottawa Senators. It was keeping the puck out of the net, whether it was Matt Murray or Eunice Corpusalo or Anton Forsberg. They finally got themselves a goaltender in Linus Ullmark, and he wasn't perfect in this series. He had some flubs, but I think he gave them a chance to win. As for their forward group, I mean, I think, Batherson and Stützle and, Brady Tkachuk was not playing at 100%. We know he was injured in the Four Nations. And I have railed against the Four Nations because you think the Boston Bruins loved the Four Nations with Charlie McAvoy being out for the year, or Matthew Tkachuk getting injured, or Brady Tkachuk. I mean, I'm not saying it's a meaningless tournament, but I'm saying these teams pay these players. They don't pay them to play in international competition. They pay them to play now.
Oh, I know. Look at Washington, right? I mean, they're the team that didn't have anybody. They look healthy. They're rolling. So they're a team that benefited from it. Although other teams, maybe there was something to be said for some of the players like Jordan Binnington, for example, who was there. He seemed to have found something from his play. Maybe it's different for a goalie, but I agree with you. So let's finish your thought with Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this team. They have veteran players who played well. Perron was fantastic in this series. Drew has something left. Shane Pinto is an excellent player. Ridley Gregg is a Marchand level pest, who I think the Leafs would like to stomp, but they were not going to.
Stolarz tried.
They'll wait until next season on a game on a Thursday night to take their exact their revenge. But I think where you could see Staios make his bid to improve this team is on defense. Shabbat is excellent. Jake Sanderson could be one of the best defensemen in this league in a year or two. He's not as experienced, but I think he's getting there. Yeah. But really, they need to add, I think, one, maybe two defensemen, preferably somebody right-handed, because I think, if they do that with the offense that they have, and if they continue to get the goaltending out of Ullmark, then they could challenge for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder to fans again, the Playoff Frenzy Live brought to you by Sticks.com. And make sure that you don't break the bank on sticks because you can actually get a pro level composite stick without a pro level price tag by visiting Sticks.com. That is STIX.com. Head over there, gear up. Seeing lots of guys breaking sticks during the playoffs. Some of them are frustrated. I know Val Nichushkin was seen at morning skate today breaking another stick. He has been frustrating. The Avalanche and the Stars are already underway in their game 6, currently 0-0 with 15 minutes left in the first period. Stars are out shooting the Avs 5-2. We'll talk about that series in a little bit, but let's talk about the series that we now know is happening, which is Florida versus Toronto. We saw what the Panthers did to a very good Tampa team. It didn't look like a very good Tampa team in a lot of these games, but that was what Florida was able to do to them. They frustrated them. They totally broke them down. They did not allow them to play their game whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's looking scary. A lot of the questions we had about the Panthers heading into the postseason with guys like Tkachuk coming back from injury, Ekblad being missing for suspension. He'll still have one more game to serve. That game 1 versus Toronto, he will not be available. But the Panthers are looking like a little bit of a machine again, kind of crazy because they should be tired, right? They don't look tired. So what do we think about this Toronto-Florida series, Michael?
Well, start throwing the rats on the ice because that's a completely applicable to this team when you have Marchand, Bennett, Tkachuk, and Tkachuk is an excellent player, but he also loves to get underneath the skin of people. Ekblad has done that when he's been in the lineup. So, this is really gonna be a tough match for the Maple Leafs. Sergei Bobrovsky out goaltended Andrei Vasilevsky in that series.
Mm-hmm.
Vasilevsky was in the first game was horrible, and I didn't think he was particularly strong. He was really inconsistent in that series. And they shut down Nikita Kucherov, who hasn't scored a goal in 14 consecutive playoff games. So if you think Mitch Marner's got problems, look at what Nikita Kucherov has done in the postseason. So I would not be surprised at some point in this series, because of the type of team that Florida is, that Toronto inserts Ryan Reeves in the lineup. Because now I don't know where. Maybe they want to break up that fourth line, because that fourth line with Lorenz and Yarncroke and Lawton, maybe that becomes the third line, and you put Reeves on the fourth line. But I do think you're going to need a bit of pushback, because Marchand and those guys are going to start playing some games, and you're going to need some response. And if you don't have a response, they're just going to keep doing what they do best, and that's screw people up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Florida has started to toe the line on playing a little bit of a dirty brand of hockey, but I won't call it that. I love their intensity. I love their physicality. I think that the officiating in this playoffs has maybe struggled a little bit to figure out exactly what kind of identity they want to give in each game. But certainly Florida has figured out exactly what they are as a team. Their identity has not changed from last season. Their chemistry is just as much apparent as it was last season. So they've got something special there. They've got something going. We've got a comment here I want to get to. In this version of the Leafs, is this version of the Leafs actually scaring teams, or are we getting fooled again? So what do you think about that?
I don't think they're scaring teams, but I think that other teams have to respect what the Leafs are right now. Okay. I mean, in the past, their defense was a hodgepodge of a collection of players who they got at the deadline, the Luke Schens or the Joel Edmondsons, decent players. But, now you have a 6-man unit with Riley and Carlo, the shutdown pairing of McCabe and Tanev, and Benoit and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, that I don't think skipped a beat in this entire 6-game series. They were excellent throughout. So that's the difference between this Leaf team and past Leaf teams. Now they're going to have to produce. That core group, they're responsible for scoring the majority of the goals. They're going to need them to perform. And that will be the difference between them being in a series and having a chance against Florida, or Florida walking all over them.
Well, this is funny because I just mentioned Val Nichushkin after I did our ad read for Sticks.com. Well, guess who put the Avalanche on the board 1-0? Val Nichushkin. Sometimes frustration from a player can be a bad thing because it's like they're in their own head. They're letting the opponent know they're frustrated. Other times, just being a little ticked off can be exactly what the doctor orders. And it seems like for Nichushkin, he's obviously found the back of the net, which is going to get him going. The scary thought, because the Avalanche have had a few players on their team that have been, like Cale Makar, perfect example. He said out loud, I need to be better. And so if those are the types of guys that start going here, Dallas could be in trouble. All right, we've got another comment. Let's check it out. Was this game more about the Leafs showing up or the Sens completely folding? I think you'd have to give a lot of credit to the Sens in this game. Certainly, They showed something. They made it interesting, like we joked about. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think the Sens. I mean, if you're taking the first half of the game where the Leafs are leading 2-0,
sure,
then you could say you would question what the Sens are doing. The Leafs played pretty good defense, but then Tkachuk scores on a nice deflection, and then they get the David Perron goal, which has to be the weirdest goal I've seen in a while, where he backhands it off the back of Stolars's head. And it was either his head or his shoulder. I think it was off the back of his mask.
Right off the, yeah.
It was off the shoulder. So, yeah. I mean, I don't think they folded. They evened up the game 2-2 in the third period, and then I think the testament to the Leafs is that they came back within a few minutes and took the lead again. And again, it was Pacioretty with Max Domi who scored the overtime winner in game 2. That third line for the Leafs really came to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch back on this Florida matchup here and make sure, fans, that you're watching us. We love having you here with us live. You have the opportunity to ask us anything that you want. Show us your comments. Who are you rooting for? Who are your picks now in this series between Florida and Toronto? Hit the comments. You might get featured. We might even send you some special swag from Sticks.com. We'll see what we've got. But make sure you join us. This matchup, what do you expect in terms of how this series with Ottawa looked versus how the Leafs will have to approach a series with Florida? It definitely feels like it's going to have a different complexion. And how can Toronto maybe ensure that they are able to establish their game? Because if they try to play the way Florida wants to, I don't think it will go well for them. What do you think?
Well, I think Ottawa was sort of a junior Florida in the sense, they had Nick Cousins and they had Ridley Gregg. They had players who were attempting to, especially in that first game, they were a rat squad. They were really trying to get underneath the skin of the Leafs, and it backfired on them because the Leafs scored, I think, 3 power play goals in game 1, and then they calmed down a little bit. Florida's not going to calm down. They're going to come right at you. Paul Maurice wants them to come right at you. The Leafs are going to have to find a way to deal with it. That's why I mentioned Ryan Reeves as a possibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Ryan Reeves is that nuclear missile that, you basically say, I mean, I always relate this story, and it's well-founded. In 1993, when the Leafs played the Kings, Wendell Clark was going at Wayne Gretzky, and the whole reason that Marty McSorley knocked Doug Gilmour down and Clark and McSorley fought was because McSorley told the Leaf bench, if you don't stop Clark from going at Gretzky, I'm going to take out your guy. So next year, Wendell Clark did the same thing to the Canucks because they were going. Gino Ojek was going at Doug Gilmour, and Wendell Clark went to the Canucks bench and said, and pointed at Pavel Bure. He says, "You go after Gilmour one more time, that guy's dead." so that that's what it's frontier justice, but that's the Leafs don't have as many physical players to combat the Florida Panthers. So they're going to have to find another way. And Craig Berube, when he won that Stanley Cup in St. Louis in 2019, he had those aggressive players like Braden Shen, who they out-Bruined the Bruins in a 7-game series, which is tough to do.
Yeah, it really is. Here we go. We got another comment from Sticks.com. That's Stix.com. Was this one of the Leafs' most complete games of the season? What do we think on that one? I mean, you got your stars showing up. You got pretty good goaltending. What do you think? The power play, obviously, getting going again is important too. What do we think?
I think it was James Myrtle from The Athletic said that the Leafs going in with a lead in the third period were 37-1-1. They blew the lead. They lost the lead, and then they got it back though. They got it back. So I mean, it's 38-1-1 now, but still, surrendering a 1-goal lead, which they've had a problem, sort of closing things out. they were able to bounce back from that and achieve the victory. But I can't say it was one of the most complete games, but it was complete enough for them to win, to ice the series away, and to move on.
They completed the series, which is
Right.
truthfully just everything that we needed to see. And I've said this before when we've been talking on the big show, but sometimes this first round is just between the nerves, between adjusting and switching into this playoff hockey mode. I really feel like some of the hardest series for teams are these first round series. And I know it's obviously a lot about matchups, but mentally, I think that there's something to be said for getting through that first round, figuring out your game, proving to yourself that you can do it, that you can clinch a series, you can move on. So one of the questions I want to ask you is, and this has been a storyline all year, Craig Berube hockey, right? We've talked about it. All the other guys couldn't seem to get it done. Craig Berube now gets them to the next round. He's implemented a style that's a little bit different than what we've seen. Is Craig Berube hockey something we still believe in? Because I know people are starting to get worried because it's not necessarily as offensive. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the Maple Leafs haven't been offensive in the playoffs because, you know, they have relied in the past in playing sort of more of a wide open style. Now they tried to sort of strap it down a little bit with Sheldon Keefe late in his tenure with the Leafs, but their problem over the last few years has not been defense. It maybe even hasn't been goaltending because at times they got good goaltending out of Samsonov or Joseph Wall. The problem has been scoring. I mean, the big guys haven't scored. And the only series that they did score was the series that they won against Tampa Bay 2 years ago. So, you know, I think the issue with the Leafs, again, it keeps coming back to that core group. They need to score. They need to do their job. They need to do what they paid over $40 million to do. It doesn't matter with the numbers that you put up during the regular season. Mitch Marner can have as many 100-point seasons as he wants. If he doesn't score in the playoffs, who the heck wants him?
Yeah. All right. Well, here's a comment that I like, and this is it's a great one. This game showed how important those off-season and trade deadline acquisitions were. Who's stood out to you, I guess, as someone who really has been a new addition that's made a very important impact?
Chris Tanev is a revelation.
Yeah.
He is now the thing that I thought when I was at the NHL draft last year and there were rumors that he was going to sign with the Leafs after playing with Calgary and Dallas. And I said, perfect tandem partner for Morgan Rielly because they played together at the World Championships years ago, right-hand shot, a solid defensive defenseman who would let Rielly jump into the attack. Berube decided, I want a shutdown pairing, and him and Jake McCabe have worked fantastically together. Yeah. Then they make the trade at the deadline and they bring in Brandon Carlo, and huzzah, after 10 years of people saying, well, you need right-handed guys to play with the left-handed guys and you need defensive defensemen to play with Morgan Rielly. What happens? You get two of the best right shot defensemen who are defenders, who are solid in their own zone, block shots are tough, and lo and behold, their defense has been much better.
Absolutely. And I think this is an interesting comment. Here we go. What does Ottawa need to add to be more successful next year? Because we've talked about where they were. Maybe they weren't necessarily as an aggressive team. They obviously went out. We saw Dylan Cousins joining them at the trade deadline. But what are some of the things that this team still is missing? Because again, this team showed a lot, but this wasn't a team that was expected to go win a Stanley Cup. This is all about experience. It was valuable for them to be in this position, to go on the run that they did, to get into the playoffs, to get Brady Tkachuk that playoff experience. So now what are the next steps?
I really think that, and it's ironic because they traded Jacob Chychrun. And the reason that they traded Jacob Chychrun is because they knew they couldn't get him signed. They tried to get him signed. He had a year left in his contract. They ended up trading him. They got Nick Jensen back in the deal. They need a Jacob Chychrun type of defenseman to add to the group that they have. Their top two are really good, Sanderson and Shabbat.
Yeah.
Artem Zub is a solid defensive defenseman, but he should be probably a 5 on a really good team, and he's a 3-4 on this team. So they need to lengthen the depth of their defense. They're sort of where Toronto has been in the last few years. They need that right shot defenseman, who eats up 20 to 25 minutes a night. And if they get that, then they're going to be scary. And I think there's room for teams like Ottawa to move up with a team like Tampa Bay maybe taking a step back in the Atlantic.
Yeah, I mean, every year we see it. There's going to be some teams that have to make that step forward, but somebody obviously is going to have to take a step back. And from what we saw with Tampa, combine that with the fact that they've been continuing to give up some valuable draft picks. It'll be interesting to see if they are due for a step back or if they will be right back in the Battle of Florida next year. All right, well, we officially have our first team from the West. Moving on, the Vegas Golden Knights have ended their series with the Minnesota Wild, a 3-2 victory tonight. They win that series 4-2. Let's just talk real quickly about what Minnesota showed, because this was a team who was treading water towards the end of the season. They got some healthy bodies back. Again, not a team that was aggressive at the deadline. They weren't necessarily expecting themselves to win, but they showed something really impressive in terms of what they were able to challenge Vegas. And this is a series that could have been very different had it not been for a questionable offsides call. But it is what it is. Vegas is moving on. What do you think about Minnesota's effort and the Golden Knights moving forward?
Well, first on the Wild, I mean, they had a difficult last part of the regular season without Kirill Kaprizov, and
Yes.
you know how valuable he is, and he showed it in this series. They were also without Joel Eriksson. They benefited from getting their first round pick Zeke Bouillon into the lineup.
Yep.
So I look at them, and I mean, they were tough out because they were a wild card team, and everybody expected Vegas to win. And they won the first game, and then I think put a scare in the Golden Knights. But the year that they won the Stanley Cup, Vegas, I think they played Winnipeg in the first round. Winnipeg gave them a tough time, and that seemed to spring them forward. So that seemed to spring them forward, and I think this series is going to have the same effect with them. They're going to play the winner of Edmonton, LA, and I'll tell you right now, I think Vegas will do a job on Edmonton. They will take them to the woodshed. They're a tough, big, physical team, and they will beat McDavid and Draisaitl into the ice.
So then I guess that's an easy segue for me. Are you saying you think that Edmonton is going to be finishing the series here tonight with LA? They are just getting underway. The puck is basically just dropping between the Oilers and the Kings. You feel like Edmonton's gonna finish this thing out?
The Los Angeles Kings mental block when it comes to the Edmonton Oilers is
crazy.
It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It is.
It's it's like that. This is why I absolutely despise the NHL current playoff system. We should not have Dallas, Colorado matchups 2-3. I call it the 2-3 corridor of death. It's ridiculous. Florida, Tampa shouldn't have played in the first round. Neither should have Dallas and Colorado. And Edmonton, LA, just for the simple fact we've seen it 4 years in a row. It's boring. Right. And I'm sure the LA Kings are tired of seeing the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers love it because they know they can beat them. And they did, and they have.
And it certainly didn't start out that way, though. I mean, it's been a Jekyll and Hyde situation with the way the Oilers started things, or maybe the way the Kings started, and then the way they obviously switched. LA again, had a mishap with that goal call, that challenge there. But give credit to the Oilers; their stars have shown up. Calvin Pickard, good for him, coming in and doing an incredible job. But I have to agree with you. I really feel like Vegas, again, getting over that hump with Minnesota, a little bit of a scare, a little bit of a wake up. Whoever they get next, and I do agree it's probably going to be Edmonton. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a long series, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm sure they're hoping that the Oilers and the Kings go 7 games. They can get a little bit of extra rest in there for themselves. All right, how about this one? Let's touch back on Toronto because they are moving on to round 2 for our final comment here of the night. How big was Matthews' impact tonight? And maybe it's not just about, the points. We talked about the core 4, but him getting on the board, him contributing, him maybe getting going a little bit. It's something that's more mental sometimes than it is from the actual game impact. But what did you see from Matthews?
Well, clearly he benefited from the sticks that he bought from sticks.com because
that's right.
But I'll say this because, and I've defended Austin Matthews this season because we know based on his lack of production this year, he has been hurt all year. I
Yes.
would not be surprised, like the week after their season ends, whether it's they win a Stanley Cup or they get eliminated by the Panthers, he's going to have a surgery. I will bet anything. There's something wrong.
Yep.
I don't know what specifically it is, but what he has done, and he did it at the Four Nations for Team USA, and he did it in this series when he couldn't score. He's been really tenacious defensively, back checking like crazy. Tonight, he had a good face-off record against, guys like Giroux, who are good face-off guys. So, he did all the little things. And on top of that, he scored the power play goal that got them off the schneid early in the first period. Or late in the first period. So I think he was very effective, but he wasn't like the 69 goal scorer that he's been.
Yeah.
There's something going on, but he got past that and contributed to their victory.
And you really can't say enough about a game like this, a situation like this, with the pressure Toronto already had coming in, for scoring that first goal and having it be on the power play. The power play, I think, had been 0 for 7 in the previous 2 games. So just to be able to get that goal, again, it went back and forth, but it's mental and it's important for them. So certainly good to see for Matthews. All right, before we wrap it up, our playoff frenzy live, I'm putting you on the spot. I want to know, Panthers, Leafs, what's the prediction? How many games? Who wins?
Panthers in 6. I don't think the Leafs can. I mean, I think the Panthers are probably coming out of the East because even with their lineup diminished from what it was last year, no Montour, no Ekman Larson. They added Marchand. They're going to get Ekblad back. They added Seth Jones. Their defense isn't the greatest, but Bobrovsky covers up for a lot, and their forwards are a mean bunch. So is it possible the Leafs could win if Florida really plays badly or Bobrovsky is terrible? Yeah. But I don't see that happening. So I think Panthers in 6.
I tend to agree with you. I actually think, not to upset Toronto fans, I actually think it might even be possible to see Panthers in 5. But I want more hockey, and I will always root for as many games in a good series as possible. But I agree with you. Regardless, I do think it's going to be Florida coming out of the East. I don't see any teams with the way that they're rolling that can challenge them. I would love to see a Florida-Washington Capitals Eastern Conference final, because I think there's some physicality and some exciting gameplay the Capitals have going right now that would be a fun matchup with Florida. But we'll have to wait a little while longer for any of that to happen. Michael, thank you so much. That does it for the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. Make sure to tune in with us again tomorrow night. The Winnipeg Jets taking on the St. Louis Blues in an important Game 6. We'll see what happens there. Again, Stix.com presenting Playoff Frenzy Live. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all real soon.